Welcome everybody to PIN's October presentation. We know that many of you are just gathering your papers and pencils and setting your kids up for school if they're home today. We'll be starting here in a couple of minutes, so get yourself comfortable, grab a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and we will be ready. Everyone you see today is either part of PIN, the board of PIN, Parent Information Network of Cherry Creek School District. We have a Board of Education member here today, and we have our two speakers from the Nectar Group, as well as a co-chair from SEAC, the Special Education Advisory Committee. So hang tight. There's going to be a lot going on today, a lot of great information for you, and we will be starting in a jiffy. All righty. So welcome. I am Susu Duga. I am one of the co-chairs of PIN, Parent Information Network, and also the programming chair. So I work to find speakers and topics that are of interest to all of us as parents, and hopefully also as teachers and staff of school districts and other organizations that work with kids. Today we have a lot of information for you. Our goal as PIN is to educate, inspire, and inform you on topics related to education, parenting, and youth-related activities and issues. So our very first speaker today is going to inform us about something that's going to be on the ballot in a month that is critical to the success of our school districts, of our neighborhoods, and of our future. So today we have Angela Green Garland, who otherwise is known as Angela the Great, and is a Board of Education member and will be telling us something that we need to know. Angela, take it away.
Thank you. And just thank you for letting me allow me a few minutes to share with you this morning. As you know, I appreciate the PIN sessions as well. I either listen to them live or I go back because pandemic parenting has kind of changed, you know, what kind of happens sometimes. So giving each other a lot of grace is really important during this time. And I appreciate the sessions and the effort that you all put into keeping these sessions going for our parents. Just want to talk to you about 4A and B. We know we have an election coming up. And 4A and B is critical to our district. We've learned that during this time that schools are essential. And so as we've talked about essential workers and frontline workers, our schools have become those places as well. Making sure that our kids are safe and have a great learning environment and that they're able to continue their social and emotional development has been really important. In order to do that, we need your help. 4A and B will help us to continue the excellence that we have in our district. 4A will help us to have, again, to continue to have competitive pay for our teachers, have great teachers, great nurses. Quick story about me, having a school nurse was very critical for my family at one point in time. My son had asthma that we didn't quite have under control, and he had a really severe asthma attack. When I say severe, he had to go to the hospital via an ambulance from school. And so had there not been a school nurse available, you know, someone just may have given him a cup of water and said, just, you know, sit in the corner and just, you know, calm down for a second, or just kind of said, you know, stop running or something like that. And so the school nurse was able to recognize that his that he was still at a pretty high level and that his vitals were getting into dangerous territory. And so school nurses are really, really important, just whether they're handing out Band-Aids or helping our students that have more chronic medical issues being able to have access to a great education. And so school nurses are critical to our communities. We are one of the only schools in the metro area that has a school nurse in every building. So we want to continue that tradition. And again, to make sure that our teachers are supported. So again, during this time, we know that, a lot of us have had to make adjustments and all those sorts of things, but we want to make sure that our teachers are supported and have what they need. The 4B portion of the 4A and B, that's the $150 million portion, and that sometimes gives people the heebie-jeebies, but I tell people to think about that like a homeowner, like the not so fun stuff. So everything that's not in home goods is in 4B. So like, fixing a roof, fixing driveways, or some of our parking lot issues, HVAC systems, some of the technology and the wiring that has to happen in our schools to make sure that they stay up to date. Also security. Again, we want to make sure that our teachers and our students and everyone in our buildings come home every day better than they left. So we want to make sure that they're having quality experiences, but make sure that our buildings are safe. So in order to, again, to upgrade the current systems that we have and then implement other safety measures and have to purchase other things to keep our children safe, that will also help with that, and also safety and security. And then another thing that has become highlighted during this pandemic time is mental health. I'm sure that we all as adults have had kind of our mental health moments, whether it be, trying to manage family. And, for myself, my parents are in another state and they're aging. And so I haven't seen them for several months, which is really, really unusual for me. And so we are a very tight-knit family. And so mental health is important. And it's also important for our students. So our students are managing our family lives, whether it be the death of a pet, or too much homework, or divorce, or, aging and ill grandparents, or just, the mean girl syndrome, or bullying on the playground. And so again, our students need to know how to manage their mental health as well. And so 4B will help us to maintain and get more mental health professionals, and also to build a mental health facility. We have some students that have really severe needs that need to have their mental health needs met, and also to be and to still be educated. And so again, when we say excellence for all, we must mean all. And so so all of our kids, whatever their neighborhood, whatever zip code, no matter where they live or how they learn, 4A and B is essential to help our district continue our legacy of excellence, and to make sure that all of our students are successful. So I think that's my time. I don't know, do I take questions now, or just let them know? Oh, my other spiel, sorry. How can you help us? Again, because of the pandemic, we don't have a lot of, we don't have access to a lot of our buildings. So we used to have homecoming, sporting events, back to school nights to get into contact with parents, but we don't have that now. And so what you can do to help us is to talk to your neighbors. 70% of all the residents in our district do not have children. So whether that means their kids already graduated, or they never had children, or they're that really cute couple that has the great dog but no kids. So we need to reach all of those people to say, will you please support us? And so great schools mean great home values. You can like us on Facebook, Citizens for Cherry Creek. That is also our website, citizensforcherrycreek.org. So you can go there. There's things that you can do to like and share if you're members of various groups in your community: book club, wine clubs, bunco, poker nights, whatever you have. If you can share that information with your various lists, fishing clubs, running clubs, all of those things. Just again, talking to your neighbors and getting the message out is very critical for us to have a successful election. If the election is not successful, the truth is we're going to have more cuts, and cuts are not good for education. We have a lot to do. And during this time, and probably as time goes on, it'll reveal that we'll probably have a lot to make up for some kids, and we cannot do that without your support. What that means as a homeowner, it's approximately for the average cost of homes in our area is $400,000. And so that'd be approximately $100 a year for a $400,000 home. So it's about $1.65 per month per $100,000 value of your home, if you're wanting to do the math. So we're my algebra people out there. So again, we need your support. You can like us if you need yard signs. I have Smoky Hill yard signs, and I have a couple of plain ones that I haven't given out yet. But I'm getting low on those. So, but again, just like, share. I'm going to paint my car so you can multitask your car and say yes on 4A and B. And again, any newsletters, emails that you're able to get our information into is very helpful at this time.
Thank you, Angela. That's a lot of great information. I've got one question for you.
Yes.
For being that Penn draws on and has a membership from some of the private schools in the area, if your kid doesn't go to a Cherry Creek School District, can you please give us some information of why those parents who are sending their kids outside of the school district would still want to vote yes on these two propositions?
Absolutely. So again, the biggest thing, I mean, the greatest thing is again, home values. You know, home values are really important. There's not, unfortunately in America, you know, home values and quality of education are very much linked. And so even when you have zip codes that are very affluent, where private school may be a way of life, they still have awesome neighborhood schools. And so awesome neighborhood schools are good, are great. They're also, and it's also a great investment in our future, right? And so you want all kids that live around you, that live in your area, to have a great and safe place to be every day. And so again, great schools are important for our community. They're important for our students who are going to be either future employees or future business owners. And again, it just also helps to produce good citizens for our future. And again, it helps to maintain the value of our homes and our neighborhoods.
Thank you. That's really great information. That's information that we can take to our friends and our networks of people. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You can see that the address for how to get in touch is down in the chat. You'll see the number, the red number 1, and that is citizensforcherrycreek.org. So if you want to sign, if you want to find out how you can help with this, you've got just under a month to do so.
Sue, I'm going to make a correction to that because
Thank
it's
you.
Citizens for Cherry Creek Schools.
Oh,
So I'll go in and make a correction.
all right. You got it straight from Janice McNally, our wellness coordinator of the district. All right, so if there's no more questions, I don't see anything on the question and answer. If anybody who is participating in our webinar today has any questions for Angela, jot them down quickly in the double little boxes down at the bottom, and we can get that her attention right away. Otherwise, we will say adieu to Angela whenever she needs to go about her day, and we will welcome Dr. Scott Siegfried, our superintendent, who is hopping from one important meeting to another. So we thank you very much, Scott, for being here today with Penn. And I will let you just give a quick State of the Union or anything else that you want to share with us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and it's great to see you all. I come on these meetings, and it's wonderful to see people interact. But I miss being with y'all. I miss being with people. It's great to get a chance to walk around our schools every once in a while. And I tell you, I've had an opportunity to even be a substitute teacher in some of our classrooms over the last couple of weeks. I think it's important for me to model that way as well. But boy, those are some of the best days I've had, is to be in classrooms with kids during this time and get that interaction with them. So I want to start by just thanking you all for being a part of our supportive community. And I want to tell you how proud and impressed I am of our teachers, our bus drivers, our food nutrition workers, our paraeducators, our administrators. We've made it through a quarter of school, something that we didn't know was even possible a number of months ago. We built an online school for 10,500 students, hired 530 teachers in 3 weeks. And I will tell you that it's hard to say that anything we're doing right now is absolutely perfect. It's not. But given that we have put this together over the summer during a pandemic, and we're able to look in kids' eyes and see them and hear their voice and educate them to the greatest extent we can, the lift of our staff is something that was and is unprecedented as in a pandemic. And I am so proud of them. I know they're exhausted. I just came from a meeting with all of our administrators from across the district, and they're exhausted, but they're exhausted for the right reasons, because they put their heart and their soul into our kids to open our buildings. And in a way that honestly, and I never like to talk well, I'm going to brag on Cherry Creek. Our kids are in school, and some of our neighboring districts haven't even thought about that, aren't even there yet. And so that's because of our great staff, all 9,094 of them coming together to do what they know is the right thing for kids. And that's something that should be celebrated in this community. And I celebrate all of them doing that. I'll tell you, having been in the class first person, it feels safe. I felt safe. I could manage and control that environment. I will, before I go on and talk about the safeness, I'll also tell you there's a little bit of concern when I was there as well. The kids were quiet. I sat there in a number of classrooms and they were quiet. Quieter than I remember kids being. Now, some of our elementary principals piped into the chat in the last meeting and said, well, the kindergartners aren't, and that's good. But our high schoolers, some of our middle schoolers are just quiet. So I start to worry. I start to worry quite a bit about the social emotional learning gaps of our kids, about the impact of isolation, about the time away from peers, about the missed opportunities and experiences of our students. And that's something that we as a community, as an organization, need to start to be very thoughtful about. I will lead that conversation for us, but it is going to take the state of Colorado to commit to doing the right thing, to funding our schools at a level where we can start talking about how are we going to make up this gap in the next 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years for these kids so we don't have a lost generation of students. So that we don't have kids that move for the rest of their lives with these gaps, both educationally and social emotionally. That will take deliberate effort, deliberate resourcing by our state, by our nation to do the right thing for our kids coming out of this. Because we're a quarter through this and we're going to celebrate that, but we've still got 3/4 of a year to go. And if it's as it is right now, great, that's the best we can do. If it's less, if we have to go remote, then we're going to have times where kids are going to have to be at home for a while. And I worry about our community, worry about our state, worry about our nation, that if we are not deliberate in how we can address that moving forward. But going back to SAFE, I will tell you that we now have a very robust data set that I've shared on multiple conversations with the Colorado Department of Health and the Metro Denver Partnership for Health, so they can look at how are schools functioning during a pandemic and how is the virus transmitting. We have had, as of today, 78 COVID positive students in our district. That's a small percentage, less than a 0.2% of our students. We have had 1,119 students quarantined because of potential close contact. Again, it sounds like a big number, but when you divide that by the 55,000 students we have or the 47,000 that are in-person learning, it becomes a very small percentage. So I will start to pivot that conversation in our community to say, yes, there were 1,000 students that had to quarantine, 54,000 students didn't have to quarantine. And of those 1,119 students that had to quarantine, 4 students became COVID positive during their quarantine. 4. And that's correlation, that's not causation. But 4 is a 0.3% of our students became positive during the quarantine. What that should tell us is that schools, the safety strategies we put in place, masks, increased ventilation, MERV 13 filters, hand sanitizing, physical distancing, testing for staff on a regular rotation, is safe. Our schools are relatively safe compared to everything else that kids have access to in the community outside of schools. It's not being spread in schools. And that's something that we should start to talk about. That when we do it the right way, when we do the right things, when we're vigilant and are consistent, there's virus spread in the community. There are individuals that bring it into schools, but it's not being spread in schools because we're doing the right things. And so that's another celebration point. And I think a point that we need to start talking about, and I will again lead that conversation in a more, in a larger way, because I want people to know that the things we're doing are safe. Now, the difficult side of that is we can be very safe as we are, but it doesn't let us change our model. The hybrid model at middle school and high school, I understand that that's difficult. I have a son that's going through it right now in cohort B. And it's not perfect. But given health guidance and given that 6 feet is important for older kids and adults, we have to be hybrid. We can't have all the kids in school at a single time. So until that changes, which I don't think it will, we can't have all the kids come to school at one time. And then I think back to what I just told you, that schools are safe because of the things we're implementing. Well, if we didn't have that 6 feet of distance, we may not be as safe and there might be more virus spread. And so it's kind of a chicken and egg with that as well. And so we'll maintain that, and we will continue to work with our students, work with our parents, work with our staff to get better and better every day. We've had a lot of conversations with our Elevation family around, we had 500 teachers that became Elevation teachers that had never been online teachers in their life. Well, they had to figure out how to be online teachers. They had to figure out how to hold classes through technology like this. They had to figure out a new system with Canvas. Our kids hadn't been online kids in their life and had to get used to that new process as well. And our parents, it's a group effort. Parents have to be involved in online. It's not a go sit in front of the computer for 8 hours and you'll be fine and everything will be taken care of. No, you have to be there with them as well, especially our younger kids. And so we're all learning together how we need to be better, and we will continue to evolve in our Elevation family and also in our in-person family. I think our elementary schools are pretty good because they're full in person every day of the week. Our middle school's hybrid and our high school's hybrid. We'll continue to get better at that. In fact, I got a great email this morning from one of our students whose parents actually I know and work for us that suggested, maybe just to mix it up and give us a little bit of opportunity to do things different, why don't you switch cohort A and B every quarter? So that then they get a different, you come to school Tuesday, Wednesday, and home Thursday, Friday. Not a bad idea. Maybe when I go back and reflect on kids are pretty quiet, maybe we need to give them a different look at their routine as well. Now, I can't pull that off in the next 3 days before we go to fall break, but maybe that's some of the things we need to start to think about. And so we will have a survey coming out to all families in the next couple of days. We want your feedback, and now it will be qualified with, we know there's health guidance we can't change. We know we're in a pandemic we can't change, but given all of that, give us some feedback on your experience, because we do want to be the best we absolutely can, because we do have a long year ahead of us and we want to continue to work to get better moving forward. One last thought that I might share with you too, you will see after fall break from me some communication and some very deliberate actions that I will include our parent and student and staff community on, that we will start talking about the future. We cannot go back based on everything that we've learned, good, bad, and ugly through this pandemic. We can't go back to just the way it was on March 11th because that's the way it was. We will be deliberate about being a different organization coming out of this. We will be better for our kids, better for our community, better as educators because of the position we've been put in. And so we as lead learners, as the lead learner, we will continue to learn and evolve this organization. And I will ask for your thoughts and your input on that, because I hope that we can continue with some of the things that we've been able to implement and learn through this time. But that is how we can use a crisis as an opportunity to be better than we've ever been and truly continue to be the innovative leaders that Cherry Creek School District is. So those are the things that are on my mind. I don't know if it's a question answer or if it's just Scott, get out of here and we continue our meeting, but I'm happy to sit and engage as well.
Thank you, Scott. Gosh, it makes me just want to jump up and down for Cherry Creek Schools that we've got you as our cheerleader and our head investigative person who's, finding the right information and making very tough choices for all of our kids, for our staff, for everyone involved. So I know you've lost a lot of sleep and you've probably gotten some gray hairs under there due to this. So I just, yeah, there's a comment there, Scott for president. So, thanks for your hard work. Thanks for the honesty and effort that you have put in.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So if we have any questions, we'll funnel them to you eventually, but everybody can look for those surveys. And hey, if you've got kids who have creative ideas, let them know that Dr. Scott will look at them and consider them. You just never know what might be a possibility. So thank you so much. I'm sure that you've got other places to go, so we will let you just click out as needed.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. We've got one more quick conversation piece before we start our webinar on ADHD. And that is, as Dr. Scott, woo, sorry about that, as Dr. Scott was talking about, that we serve all kids, and Angela was talking about that. We have Kelly Yoder here who represents SEAC, and she can tell us more about that organization.
Hi, thanks for including us this morning. I will be brief so that you guys can get to your main presentation. I am the parent co-chair for the Special Education Advisory Committee. I'm a parent in the district. I have 2 kids at Grandview, one who is in the ILC program there, and that's what led me to be involved with SEAC. So our group is a little similar to PIN in that we meet monthly. We provide topics like this. In fact, we meet on Thursday, and I'm going to give you some information about that. We always meet the second Thursday of every month, and we do try to stick to topics that are most important to kids with special needs in the district. I think sometimes people just think of kids more like my son, who is in an ILC program, but actually our district has a higher than average number of kids on IEPs. And, you know, I believe, just because my experience, I think most people do, that as a district, we do serve these kids pretty well. And so I know Tony Poole likes to say we're a destination district for students on IEPs. And we try to cover topics that are relevant to parents whose families fit into that category. And so we do cover some more severe needs issues, but like in the spring, we'll cover twice exceptional kiddos. This month, we'll actually talk about remote learning plans. Hopefully we don't have to worry about those, but if we do, we actually will have district speakers. Some of our coordinators and directors will be speaking on Thursday about what that looks like for our kids, what it means that it's not a complete switch from your IEP, but it is actually all schools have had to create plans for each kid. I think it's been very laborious for teachers and staff, but they are all in place for us so that when we do go remote, or if we do go remote, the kids are going to be served as best they can. One of the other things we do during the year is we do the Golden Heart Awards. And this year, like everything else, like our presentations also, it's going to look a little different, and the district awards will all look different as well. But we honor people in the district. They might be students, they could, might be staff, they could be bus drivers. We've actually had a police officer honored. So those who have gone above and beyond to help kids with special needs in our district. And we will take nominations for that. I believe it's going to be November, December this year. And then we, in the spring, will honor those people who are selected. I'm going to just share our flyer for this month, and it gives a little information. Oh, let's see here. Oh, look, we're looking at Susu. There we go. Hang on a second. My screen is looking a little different. We actually practiced this. We'll see if I do share my screen. If we go to the district website, which is, I'm not going to share my screen. I really apologize, you guys. I had this all practiced, I thought, and I'm not a professional. So anyway, I'm going to just give out my email address right now, or if you want to send me an email at kellyoder76@msn.com. I can give you specific information about our meeting on, oh, thanks, I see that down there in the chat. I can give you specific information about our meeting. I can send you the flyer. And if you go to the website and you look up Special Education Advisory Committee, it actually has the link, and we're using the same link for this entire year. And you can get more information there. But like I said, we will be covering remote learning plans. We have Scott coming in November, and then in December, we're actually going to try to do a parent coffee. We usually do that in person, but we'll see what a parent coffee looks like virtually for us this year. And again, thanks so much for letting me just tell you a little bit about our group, and I'll let you guys get to your speaker.
All righty. Thank you, Kelly. That information will be in our chat, as you can see. And next, in 2 weeks after fall break, we will have one more presentation for PIN. Angela and Kelly will also be here to give you a recap of that information. So put on your calendars, October 20th, 6:30. We'll have Kelly and Angela from 6:30 to 6:45, and we'll have our speakers, Danny and Andrea, speaking about executive function, which you will have a flyer coming into your mailboxes this week to talk about that. That is a reminder for all of you to go back to our website after this presentation and sign up so that you can get our flyers directly into your email box that tell you of the forthcoming presentation. So with this said, let me go ahead and let you, like we would do in PIN, stand up, stretch, fill your coffee, fill your tea, let the dog out, which is what I had to run and do. That's why I'm out of breath, running up and down the stairs. Do what you need to do. We'll start in about 1 minute. All righty, folks. So we know you all have tuned in today to learn a little bit more about ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Thankfully, we have two amazing people who have learned and focused on this topic amongst others for a while, and they have got some cutting edge information to share with you. The Nectar group is where these two gals come from, Danny GUGEL and ANDREA PITMAN. The Nectar group happens to be one of our platinum sponsors for PIN, along with Happy Canyon Flowers, Induc, and Chile Camps. So we are so grateful for all of their participation in PIN, which allows us to do these presentations all year, it looks like it, virtually, and to offer them to you as podcasts from the past. Back in the good old days when we met in person, we had podcasts. Now we have videotapes. So if you happen to miss this, or you want somebody else that you know would appreciate this, they can watch this video at a later time by going on to the same website and finding the link for it. So anyway, we would like to get started with Andrea and Danny teaching us about ADHD, getting it into focus. Take it away, gals.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We are so excited to have you guys here today. This is such an important topic to parents, students, educators, especially as we've been working and learning from home. So we hope to really be able to give guidance to parents on how we can help students with ADHD even more, and what are some great resources or strategies to implement at home. So a little bit about who we are. My name is Danny GUGEL. I am the center director at the Nectar Group, and I was an educator, a middle school educator for 10 years, both internationally and then here in several school districts in Colorado. I'm actually a homegrown product of Colorado school districts, so I know how important it is that we always continue to support them whenever they're on the ballot. So glad Angela was able to tell us about that today. But got my master's as a reading interventionist, and this topic today is just so important as a former educator because I know how many of our students need extra support or just extra creative ways that they can access education and learn because their brains are unique and different, and we have to support them with their strengths and with anything that's challenging. So excited to be here with you guys today.
And I'm Andrea PITMAN. I'm the executive director and founder of the Nectar Group. And I'll just echo Danny's sentiments in terms of our excitement to be able to share some information in terms of understanding more about ADHD. It's probably the #1 question we're asked as we're serving as educational consultants to families in the community. We hear a lot about ADHD, and there's a lot of misinformation and really good information. So we hope to sort that out for you and give you some practical applications you can take away today. My background is in education as well. I'm a former middle school teacher, not in Colorado, I hate to say, but from Texas. And I was able to start my career in the classroom, but early in that teaching career left to work in the field of neuroscience. I was really curious about the root causes of learning challenges and how to treat those in really corrective measures to help students overcome those issues. And so my passion is really bridging the gap between neuroscience and the latest research and education, both for parents with their children at home, to schools and classrooms as well. So thanks for joining us today.
Just one quick minute on who we are, who is the Nectar Group within the community. We're a cognitive neuroscience and education company, and we're dedicated to helping not only children and teenagers, but also adults overcome learning and memory challenges so that they can reach their full potential. And today's presentation, we know there's going to be so many questions, so please feel free to use the Q&A panel. Andrea and myself will take turns when we're not presenting, answering questions for you or letting you know if that information is coming up in the presentation. But we want you to be able to walk away today with all of your questions answered or with whatever next steps we can provide for you. In terms of who we work with, we're actually located in Greenwood Village, Colorado. So we're super close to a lot of the Cherry Creek schools. And we also do provide all of our services online, a lot of our therapies online. And we've been doing that for over 7 years. And so we're really used to all of the remote elements and have a lot of practice with that. So we're glad that's actually something we can offer because it means that we can provide services for families no matter where they're located geographically. We work with clients in other states and then also some families that are in actually other countries. We have a student we see in Ecuador right now. So that's important to us because everyone should have services no matter where they're located. We work with clients ages 4 and up, and we know that no matter what age you are, you can absolutely improve the brain, and that's the exciting part of neuroscience that we'll talk a little bit about today. And we work with students with all types of diagnoses. A huge portion of the students we work with have ADHD, dyslexia, autism, or might be twice exceptional, or any other kinds of ranges of learning challenges, as well as traumatic brain injuries. And we also work with students and adults who are just looking for a competitive edge or are trying to improve their skills. So now we'll dive a little bit into what we're doing today. So Our goals for today are to give you some information around methods for diagnosing ADHD, because we know there's so many questions in terms of what's the best way to get a diagnosis, or what are the differences and how to do that. We also will go over presentations and common symptoms of ADHD, understanding the root causes of ADHD, and then holistic treatment options, suggestions for ways to get support from your school, suggestions for at home, because we know so many of you are, helping with education with your students who are doing hybrid learning or homework or any range of at-home learning these days. So please, again, if we're not answering your question verbally, let us know so we can answer it. So let me dive right in. We want to first talk about the presentations and common symptoms of ADHD, because, of course, for you to understand if this is relevant to you, you need to know if the symptoms that maybe your child is exhibiting fit ADHD. So the first type of or presentation of ADHD is called inattentive type. A lot of people are actually going to reference ADD, someone who is inattentive but not hyperactive. But there's actually no diagnosis of ADD. The official diagnosis is ADHD inattentive type. And inattention is going to look like 6 or more of the symptoms that are on the screen right now, if they're children, 5 or more symptoms if they are 17 and older. So the symptoms have to have persisted for at least 6 months to a degree that it's consistent with developmental level, and it negatively impacts directly on social and academic occupational activities. So pretty much these symptoms have to persist across multiple areas of their life, and they actually have to be impacting their social and academic areas of their lives. So it's not going to be, oh, just this one day, it's going to be persistent. Symptoms are not solely like a manifestation of, behavior or opposition. They're going to be things that people are going to see, educators for your child are going to see, parents are going to see. So multiple people in their lives will see these. So let's just go over a couple of the inattentive presentations, the symptoms that you might be seeing. So kids with inattentive type of ADHD often fail to give close attention to details, or they make careless mistakes in schoolwork. So they overlook or miss details, or their work is inaccurate. They might miss a step on a math problem. They often have difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play activities. So difficulty remaining focused during lectures, conversations, or lengthy reading. They often do not seem to listen when they're spoken to directly. Their mind seems elsewhere, they're distracted. They often do not follow through on instructions, and they fail to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties in the workplace. They start tasks but quickly lose focus, and they're easily sidetracked. One of my favorite stories that a parent once told us was she gave her daughter 3 things to go upstairs and do, and she came up and there was glitter glue all over. That was not one of the 3 things that she had told her to do, but that's what happens is oftentimes we get lost in between maybe step 1 and 2, and then everything is off track. Another symptom might be that they dislike, avoid, or are reluctant to engage in any kind of activity that requires sustained mental effort. They like to be a lot more active and don't want to have to sit and do a puzzle for an hour. They often have difficulty organizing tasks and activities, really understanding their materials and belongings in order. Messy, disorganized work, and they often avoid, dislike, or are reluctant to actually get involved in tasks that are going to have multi-step instructions, and they're forgetful in some daily activities. Now, of course, your child may not present with all of these, but it's if they have 6 or more of these symptoms that they are presenting with ADHD inattentive type. The next type is called hyperactive presentation. And I think this is the one where most people associate ADHD because we oftentimes think ADHD, we think kids can't sit still in their chairs. And that's part of it for sure. But it's just that hyperactive or impulsive presentations are much more visible than inattentive presentations. So again, if 6 or more of these symptoms are prevalent in your child, or 5 or more for if they're 17 or older, that's where they're trending with a diagnosis of hyperactivity for ADHD. So they often fidget or tap their hands, squirm in their seat. There are kiddos who really want something to fidget with, their pencils or paper or something as they're working. They often leave their seat in situations when remaining seated is expected. And so, especially in Zoom meetings, I think a lot of teachers have identified that it's a lot harder for someone who's hyperactive to sit still. They often run or climb in situations when it's inappropriate, just due to being restless and feeling like they need to move frequently. They often are unable to play or engage in leisure activities quietly. They're on the go. It looks like they're driven by a motor, and they don't typically like to be just like comfortable and chill in their seat for a long time. They talk excessively oftentimes, and they oftentimes will also blurt out an answer before a question has been completed, maybe finishing someone's sentences or giving the answer to a question when it was someone else's turn. And they also often interrupt or intrude on others. So that might be whether it's, using somebody else's materials or intruding into someone else's activity and kind of taking over the situation. Now, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has 3 different types of presentations. So sometimes kids are going to present as predominantly inattentive presentation. Sometimes they're going to present as predominantly hyperactive or impulsive. And then there's actually the combined presentation, where you're seeing symptoms from both sides, the inattentive and the hyperactive. And this is called combined presentation. And for all types, symptoms must be present before age 12. And this is something that not a lot of people know, but someone cannot be diagnosed with ADHD if their symptoms present later on in life. And they also have to be present for 6+ months in multiple settings, like I said before. So if it's just showing up at school or just at home, it's not going to qualify as an ADHD diagnosis. It has to be prevalent across all areas. Now, the prevalence of ADHD, we oftentimes, I think, there's a conception that ADHD is really prevalent in our society, but 5% of children present with ADHD diagnoses, and 2.5% of adults have an ADHD diagnosis. Now, of course, there's probably a lot of students and adults who don't have an official diagnosis, but it isn't as common as oftentimes I think is presented in mainstream. Also, when you are diagnosed with ADHD, it occurs on a spectrum, just like dyslexia, just like even blood pressure. If we're thinking as adults, it's going to occur on a spectrum. And so a child or a student can actually present all the way from mild. So they meet the baseline, or they meet a little over the baseline for symptoms, and it's a minor impairment on their life. Then there's moderate severity, so it does impact them more greatly. And then there's severe presentations where it's an excessive symptoms over the baseline, and it's a marked impairment. It really does get in the way of a lot of the areas of their life. So you can occur anywhere on the spectrum when it comes to ADHD, and that's why sometimes it's hard for parents or educators to know if a child does have ADHD, because if they're presenting as mild, or if they present as inattentive, sometimes we don't see that. And so the next thing we actually want to talk about is ways that ADHD can hide, because so often we see that ADHD hides in the classroom or at home, and it's hard for parents and educators to know what to do with those types of presentations. So Andrea is going to actually hop in, and she's going to tell us how it can hide.
Thanks, Danny. So as Danny was just referencing, the presentation, inattentive is harder to see than hyperactive. You know, we all know that kiddo who's bouncing off the walls, not listening to directions. It's much easier to see than the inattentive presentation. These are the kids that may seem like daydreamers. They may feel, you know, just seem like they're kind of zoning. They tend to be zoning out. They may tend to kind of feel like they're just kids that don't like the spotlight on them, those kinds of things. We also have kids that are great at developing self-accommodation. So if they are high functioning cognitively, meaning they have high levels of intellect and they're bright, they may really be able to get by during school years due to not struggling academically. And so it may go unnoticed. They also learn through trial and error different types of strategies to help them mitigate the symptoms. So they may know, for example, that they always forget their materials for school. So they, you know, with mom or dad's help, at some point, they kind of create a system that allows them to stop forgetting and to ensure greater success. And so we know that also symptoms look very different for different people. So there's gender differences. We see that boys do present more impulsively than females. And so thus males are diagnosed more frequently than females. There's also personality differences. A kiddo who's more outgoing, more of a risk taker, is going to be more likely to be diagnosed than someone who's shy and has a quiet personality. It's important for all parents and educators to kind of be aware of these symptoms and the presentation and the ways it can hide so that we don't allow kids to fall through the cracks. One of the good things that we're going to spend most of the presentation today talking about is some of the hope that there is if you have a child who is struggling with ADHD, is really learning about some of the ways that we can actually have scientific interventions that have shown to really treat some of the root causes. So next, we're going to actually look at, okay, so what actually are the root causes of ADHD? There's a couple approaches to ADHD treatment, and one is to actually treat the root issues, and the other is to manage symptoms, or it's a combination of both. Our focus and our passion is on treating the root issues so that we're not just working with symptom management the rest of their life. Symptom management is important, but we feel it's more important to actually treat and remediate the problems that are causing the ADHD to begin with. So we're going to look at a graphic that we use at the Nectar Group all the time in order to better understand those root causes of ADHD. So we call this the potential pyramid because we find for children to really reach their full potential, at least academically, they need all three tiers of this working well. And this does relate directly to the ADHD. So let me just explain what you're seeing, and then we'll dig into where the cause answer lies. So the foundational level of our cognitive, of our potential pyramid is our cognitive skills. And you can think of these as kind of like your computer processor. They're always running in the background. That would allow you to take in information, store it, retrieve it for later, process it, and pay attention to it. This is also where a lot of our, a portion of our impulse control lives also. Then we have our tier 2. This is more like our brain's database. So this is our knowledge bank. This could be reading, writing, math, science, history, really any subject matter that you're learning and that you're filling your database with. And then the tip of the pyramid are our behaviors. These are a lot of our skills that we call executive function skills will live here. Executive function skills live on both the behavior and the cognitive tier. So motivation, self-confidence, willingness to take risks. Again, some of that impulse control, organization, time management, how you take tests, how you study, all of that lives here on this tier. So super important things that I'm sure many of you have had some frustrating moments with if you're living with someone with ADHD. So what we know is that if there are deficits on tier 1, then tiers 2 and 3 suffer. And so there's actually a researcher named Dr. John Rady. He is a medical doctor who is a researcher of ADHD. He's on staff at Harvard Medical School. He's written a couple of great books, one called A User's Guide to the Brain and another one called Spark, that's particularly of interest to people who have kiddos with ADHD, because it's about the power of exercise and using it to treat ADHD. But I heard him speak at Children's Hospital a few years ago, and he explained that in their research, they find that the root cause of ADHD in 92% of their study cases is actually rooted in one or more deficits in that tier 1, those cognitive skills. And so again, we know that many of the cases are found there. The National Institute of Health did a long-term study looking at the root causes of learning disabilities, ADHD being one of those, but also looking at things like dyslexia and other types of, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, all the different types of learning disabilities. And they found that 80% of the time they were rooted in one or more weak cognitive skills. So we know that this is where the culprit lies for most people. So what the next question should be is, okay, well, if the ADHD is primarily caused by weaknesses in the cognitive skills, what causes weaknesses in cognitive skills? So we're going to look at a few different kind of factors, some correlated features briefly about the causes for deficits in those cognitive skills, because that's what we want to treat to truly improve function of the skills that are important for kiddos with ADHD and adults for that matter. So the first area we're going to look at are neurological factors. We know that on an EEG scan, a brain scan that's used like to measure, for example, seizure disorders, but it measures brain waves. We have increased slow brain waves and decreased fast brain waves in people with ADHD. We also have reduced total brain volume, which means there's less neurons that have fired and wired together that are firing to build, to trigger neural connections, and which allow our cognitive skills to function. We also have a delay in posterior and anterior cortical maturation, which is a mouthful. However, let me explain this. This is the part of the brain which is the prefrontal cortex, and it develops later in life for all of us. For interesting fact is for women, it typically finishes development around 24 years old, and for men around 28 years old. So there is a difference in gender in terms of development of this part of the brain. But it does develop, for people with ADHD, it develops even later in life than the neurotypical brain. And this is so important because this is the part of the brain that's responsible for much of our executive function skills, time management, prioritization, being able to weigh pros and cons and make sound decisions, connecting consequence to behavior. That is all in this part of the brain, and we know that it's delayed in its development in people with ADHD. We also know that there are 3 cognitive skill weaknesses that are strongly associated with these correlated features. And that's slow processing speed, back to also those increased slow brain waves. So the processing speed, the brain's kind of internet speed is running slow. And so we always say kids with ADHD, their brains are like, it's like they went to the, the equivalent of going to the Apple store and buying a brand new MacBook Pro and upgrading it with every upgrade they have, and then coming home and plugging it into dial-up internet. Now, kids today won't know what dial-up internet is, but for your parents, you probably remember dial-up internet. It's going to struggle to function. You probably can't even open your email, much less like stream a movie or something like that with that dial-up internet. And so this processing speed we know is very slow. That results in that zoning out, that inability to pay attention, and it also results in some children, based on personality, and hyperactivity. We have a saying, this is the slower the processing speed, the busier the body in many kids. So that's where you get some of that fidgetiness. And then working memory and attention, of course, are other areas that are almost always low in terms of the function of these skills. Another thing that impacts ADHD thus the cognitive skills, or the cognitive skills first, and then because of that it develops into ADHD, is genetics. Now, there are no biomarkers confirmed, so you can't go get a DNA test and find out if you have like the ADHD gene or not. We don't have that information yet. It is highly heritable though, so 50% of parents of children with ADHD also have ADHD. So I'm sure some of you listening probably have ADHD or live with a spouse or co-parent with someone who has ADHD as well. It does run in families. And then again, it's more frequent in males than females. The research actually shows that this is not actually that it's more common, it's just that it's diagnosed more frequently because of how it presents. There's also some environmental factors. All of these have been found to increase the risk of ADHD, and that's birth weight of less than 1,500 grams. It increases your risk by 2 to 3 times. So if your child was born premature, there is a higher risk for that. And it's always, these are always crummy because all of these things are, whether it's genetics or premature birth, or no one's fault, so I think parents always want to know, did we do something? Did we cause this? And in most cases, the answer is no. The vast majority of time, it's out of everyone's control. Brain injuries certainly can cause ADHD or symptoms. Lack of oxygen or physical trauma during birth, like an umbilical cord being wrapped around the neck or some other type of birth trauma where there's a drop in oxygen in particular. Exposure to environmental toxicants such as lead. Luckily, we have a lot of safety measures in our society now around this, but if there is exposure to chemicals or toxins, exposures to substances in utero, so alcohol, drugs, cigarette exposure while the mother is pregnant, and then emotional trauma. This is not just like our ups and downs of life kind of trauma that we all go through, or even like the death of a family member or divorce in a family. Those are not typically things that are significant enough to cause ADHD. This is more extreme abuse or neglect, and very traumatic experiences for the child are things that can cause impact to those cognitive skills. Psychological factors, again, as I've already mentioned, family interaction patterns are very unlikely to be the cause, but they might contribute to secondary behavioral symptoms. So family stressors can increase the severity of symptomatology. So for example, if your family moves and you're in a new neighborhood, new friends, new school, that's going to be stress for everyone, right? And if your child already has ADHD, that most likely is going to aggravate the symptoms. And so you'll see an increase. Maybe they're typically in the mild range, but they spike to moderate or severe. But then when the circumstances calm down, they will drop back down to a more mild stage. There's also some cultural influences that impact diagnostic practices. It's different across different countries, the way you diagnose, and then just attitudes toward or interpretations of children's behavior. What one person might consider like significant attentional issues, someone else might consider just a boy being a boy or something like that. And so that can impact who gets diagnosed as well. So lots of different factors that cause impact to those cognitive skills that we know are the root. Danny, you are muted. There you go.
So we sent you, or I believe that the PIN Network sent you a packet of materials, and some of that material is going to be the notes from today's presentation. And then in there is also an ADHD symptom survey. And it's a little screener that's going to actually go over the symptoms of both inattentive and hyperactive presentations. And so what we encourage you to do is actually take the time to fill that out for your child. And that will give you a little bit more of insight of, are they presenting in a way where you can then go forward with next steps in terms of diagnosing and support for your child? So that's a really easy tool to use, and we want you to be able to use it and ask us questions as you're using it, or if after the presentation our information is in that packet, you can always send us questions about what you're seeing specifically with your child, so that you're able to really get to what's going on and the root issues. So make sure you take time to do that. We don't need to pause and do it during the presentation, but again, if you need any kind of questions answered as you do it after the presentation, reach out to us.
Perfect. And before we go into our next part of our presentation, there's a couple of questions that I do want to address, and then we'll move on to, if your child does have symptoms, what do you do about it? Probably the main reason you all came today. So someone did ask about what the statistic I quoted from Dr. John Rady, which was, they asked if that I said 92% of ADHD is rooted in cognitive skills, and someone was asking, did I say in behavior or in cognitive skills? And their research was showing that 92% of cases of ADHD were caused by one or more deficits in the cognitive skills versus it being caused by behavior. We see that behaviors are a manifestation of those issues in the cognitive function. So hopefully that clears that up. Another question that I wanted to answer is that this person has said that they've heard that video games impact kids with ADHD more than others, and they wanted to know if this is true. And so this is a great question. Danny and I actually teach a whole workshop called Parenting in the Digital Age. If you're interested in that, we have it recorded and we're happy to email you a video. So just let us know if you want the recording of that. Big topic for all of us, right? But, and I know you've had some recent speakers on screens and children. So, but we do know that kids with ADHD do have a greater impact and a higher risk of digital media overuse or addiction than neurotypical brains. And the reason for this is that we know that in many children with ADHD, they have lower than average dopamine levels. And so they crave dopamine to kind of regulate themselves. And video games are probably the most effective way, not necessarily the healthiest way, but the most effective way to spike dopamine levels. We do actually tell you a really interesting statistic. One of the places that we refer students to if they do need to have treatment for video game or screen addiction, they actually require that children be off video games for 30 to 45 days before testing for ADHD, because heavy video game usage can cause ADHD symptoms to the degree that it can cause you to get a false positive during testing. So we do advise that before you test your child for ADHD, if you're going to do some comprehensive like psychoeducational or neuropsych testing, that you do remove video games from the picture to let them get back to kind of a more balanced and normal level and not be altered by the video games. So just something interesting there. Again, that's a whole workshop in and of itself. So we won't dig into that. But if you do have a child that has symptoms of ADHD, you want to make sure that you are getting them tested. There is a question that came in about the correlation of ADHD and other neurodiverse conditions, such as people on the autism spectrum, high functioning like Asperger's, dyslexia, etc. And one of the reasons we do recommend getting a thorough evaluation before beginning treatment for ADHD is that there are many co-occurring disorders that go alongside ADHD. And we want to make sure that those comorbidities or co-occurring disorders are recognized so that they can be treated appropriately as well as with the ADHD. There's also many things that look like ADHD but are symptoms of other things as well. I always say it's like 4 of us could have a stomach ache and it could be by 4 completely different things. Someone could have a flu, someone could have eaten something bad for lunch, someone could have an ulcer. So the way we would treat each of those would be different based on the causes. And so effective treatment begins with an effective and accurate diagnosis. So we're going to look next at some methods for diagnosing so that you can get a whole picture for your child. Now, there are several ways that you can get diagnosed for ADHD, 2 primary ones and one that can help in getting additional information. So we're going to review those quickly and give you some of the pros and cons of that. So let me get sorry, lost my control panel there. There we go. So the first is in a medical setting, and this is primarily done by a primary care physician or a psychiatrist, a pediatrician, etc. And so the way they do this is they will take an interview with a parent to get a complete medical history. The goal is to rule out other medical causes that might be causing ADHD symptoms, like a thyroid issue can sometimes cause ADHD symptoms. So they'll want to rule those things out. They will usually give you a short screener or behavior scale. And then they may do some physical exams like hearing or vision to just rule that in or out. The result is that you will get a diagnosis of, yes, you have ADHD, or no, we don't think it's that, and a prescription, if appropriate, if you're going to choose a pharmaceutical route for treatment, or they may refer you to a psychologist for further diagnostic testing. So there's some pros and cons to this type of testing in the medical practitioner's office. The pros are that it's a quick evaluation. It's easy and quick to make an appointment. It's a short appointment time. The average appointment for diagnosing ADHD at a pediatrician's office in the US, studies have shown that it's on average 7 to 15 minutes. So it's a very quick appointment. It's inexpensive. It's the cost of a copay. And you also are most likely meeting with a doctor that you have a pre-existing care relationship with. They know your child's medical history. Again, you have that relationship, and if warranted and you choose to go a pharmaceutical route for treatment, then they can prescribe the medication as well. The downside of this type is that it's a quick evaluation. There's not enough time and attention to really get the full scope for the child, and they frequently in this type of diagnosis overlook coexisting or comorbid conditions with overlapping symptoms. Most physicians do not specialize in ADHD diagnosing. That's not a criticism of medical doctors, of course, but it's not their specialty. You know, if you have a cardiac problem, you're going to go to a cardiologist. Your primary care doctor can probably help some with that, but they're going to eventually send you to a cardiologist if you need that specialized care. And it's the same with a pediatrician or or family practice doctor. The screeners or behavior scales they use are what are called face valid. This basically means that you can intentionally or unintentionally skew the results to match what you think is going on. So if you feel like if you're in kind of like crisis and your child is driving you up the wall and you're trying to manage it and you're like, I really need help, you may answer all the questions they're asking to an extreme and it's going to show up as a positive. And so ideally, we want to use measures that don't allow people to do that on a subconscious level. It also does not provide intervention or recommendations for school or home. In most cases, it's really focused on symptom management, and it is a medication first model. So their tool, their resource that most physicians use is going to be a prescription pad to manage the symptoms. So the next way, so that's some of the pros and cons of medical setting. Another place where testing is important is in your school. Now, to be clear, schools are not allowed to diagnose disorders or disabilities in terms of medical conditions like ADHD. I'm a teacher and I'm not allowed, I'm a certified teacher and I'm not allowed to do that. We have on staff school psychologists, they're not allowed to do that. Their licensure doesn't provide that. You have to be a DORA regulated medical doctor or have a medical license like a licensed clinical psychologist does to be able to give that diagnosis. So this is no criticism of schools, it's just not their role. Their job is to educate and to ensure equal access to education for all students. And you're in a district that is very committed and great at doing that. And so, but school testing is done typically by someone with a master's degree or a PhD, maybe a school psychologist or educational psychologist. They will typically give a much broader range of testing than in a medical setting. And so, for example, they are going to give cognitive measures, sometimes socio-emotional tests, educational assessments. They will do classroom observations, and they will give you a report incorporating the background and the test results. It will be an education-focused recommendations and interventions. Of course, they can't prescribe your child medication or even probably give you like nutritional advice or some of those other outside treatments, but they will be able to give you the educational recommendations that they can implement in the school. The pros is that this is definitely a more thorough evaluation than in a medical setting. It's accessible through your child's school-based education team or special education team. It's no cost because your taxes are paying for that. And then it is, recommendations are made for the school by the school. So it's really integrated there. The cons are that it's not a diagnosis. You're not going to be able to get a diagnosis of many of the different types of learning problems or medical conditions. You're going to get part of the picture. They do have less training and specialization in what's called a holistic biopsychosocial evaluation. Again, that's not a criticism. It's just the specialization that each of these professionals have. They also, obviously, as we already talked about, can't give you a medication prescription. And again, in this type of testing, comorbidities or other conditions presenting like ADHD might be missed because that's not their training or their focus of what they're diagnosing. The third type of testing is in an outpatient or private practice setting. Now, for full transparency, this is the testing that we do at the Nectar Group as well. There's many places in the community that offer this testing, but we do offer this type of testing. It's done by a clinical psychologist or neuropsychologist. They will have PsyD or PhD. Just a public service announcement on this, you want to make sure that if you're getting this type of testing, I really recommend that you go to someone who is licensed. There are clinical psychologists that are not licensed that are in private practice, and they will do the testing, but they are without the licensure, they cannot give you the diagnosis. We get families, almost on a weekly basis, who bring us outside test scores because we offer complimentary review of test scores and free second opinions. And when we go to review those, we find that they actually don't really have a medical diagnosis. And so because the person wasn't licensed. And so you can always go you can Google Colorado, check a license, and it'll pop up to DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies, and you can put in the person's name and you can get their licensure information. We had a family recently who came in with really questionable testing done, and when I checked the provider, they had sanctions against their license and disciplinary action being in the middle of being taken. So this is a great place. You always want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and trust the professionals, but make sure you're doing your due diligence to check who you're entrusting this testing to. So that's something that I definitely recommend. Also, if they're not licensed, your insurance may not cover it. And so to get health insurance coverage, it needs to be a licensed professional. So that's important to know. The way this is done is it begins with what's called an extensive clinical biopsychosocial history. It looks at the whole picture of the child from birth to current. It also looks at a full psychoeducational evaluation, which is cognitive assessments, continuous performance tests, which are tests that look at attention, achievement tests, socio-emotional assessments, and personality measures. So this really looks under every stone, and it will you'll get the result will be a thorough analysis of background and testing data. You'll also get the diagnosis for ADHD if appropriate, or any other diagnoses from mental health like depression, anxiety, to other learning issues like dyslexia, Asperger's, those kinds of things. You will get tailored recommendations for accommodations for school, for interventions and therapeutic interventions, or in therapeutic measures, I should say, and then lifestyle changes like sleep, diet, etc. One of the things that we recommend that when you do outpatient setting or private practice testing is that you go somewhere that specializes in both the diagnosing and also the treatment. At the Nectar Group, when we do this psychoeducational battery, we have a clinical psychologist, a neuropsychologist, educational consultant, special educator, reading specialist, all can be involved in that testing. So we're looking at it both from the medical and diagnostic side, but also from what do we do about it and how does this impact school and home, which is really important. So the pros of this is that it's a thorough evaluation. You get a specialized professional who's knowledgeable about the nuanced diagnosing of ADHD. That's what clinical psychologists who specialize in psychoeducational testing, this is their specialty. So you're going to the cardiologist for ADHD. They can investigate other causes that might either be contributing to or appearing as ADHD and diagnose those comorbidities. And it's going to ideally be a holistic evaluation with holistic recommendations. Not everywhere does the holistic recommendations, so that's important if that's of value to you and importance to your family of really going in deep with treatment versus just diagnosis. You want to vet that when you're seeking someone to do testing. It is several days of appointments. It's expensive. This is the biggest downside of it. This testing is anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000. However, many insurance plans do cover it. So we're always happy to work with families to determine the best way to use your insurance, HSAs, FSAs, those kinds of things. You won't get a medication prescription in this type of appointment. You would need an additional appointment for that if you were going to pursue medication. And so this is an important piece. One thing that I will mention now, and we'll mention again at the end, is that we do at the Nectar Group offer a complimentary cognitive screen for any family who reaches out to us that attends our webinars and our programming that we do in the community. What this is it's about an hour and 15-minute assessment done by one of our psychometrists that looks at the 6 core cognitive skills and helps us determine if further testing is even warranted. So this is a completely $0. There's no obligation or anything like that, but it comes with the assessment and then a follow-up meeting with me or Danny to go over the results and give you recommendations. If we can sometimes rule out that you need to have that full psychoeducational test battery, and so you can really save yourself a lot of steps, and it helps us start to look at those underlying issues that can cause symptoms of ADHD so we can point you in the right direction. So you'll have our contact information. We'll share at the end. You can feel free to reach out to us if that's something that you can have. Someone's asking if the child has already been diagnosed, can you still come in? Absolutely, because they may have been diagnosed in a different way. So we're always happy to do a screen regardless if they've been diagnosed or not. We also are always happy to do a complimentary review of your outside testing if you've already been tested to get some additional recommendations. So that's something that can be really helpful. So I know we spent a bunch of time on this because it's so important to get to the foundation, but we want to talk most importantly with our remaining time about what are our options for treatment. So I'm going to go over first some things that are holistic treatments, that are services that you do have to go to outside of a school setting to get the therapeutic treatments for ADHD. And I'm going to cover a few, and the ones that I'm covering are ones that have scientific evidence to be really accepted, to be valid, and that we can see measurable changes on brain imaging when you undergo these treatments. There are many other treatments, but we focus on being grounded in neuroscience and focusing on the ones that have some scientific evidence. That doesn't mean there's not other effective measures, but these are the big ones that we know. We're then going to go into and spend the bulk of our time things you can do at home, as well as things that you can do kind of suggestions for things in the school that aren't like therapies that you have to go seek outside. So the first thing I want to talk about is cognitive training. This is where you actually treat that base of the pyramid. This is Danny and both of our expertise. We offer this type of therapy at the Nectar Group. There are 7 clinics across the US that do offer this, which is one of the reasons why we see students from all over the country, because there's not necessarily a place you can go in your community. Excuse me. So this is what is one-to-one intensive coaching that targets cognitive deficits, such as the working memory, processing speed, attention. It works by stressing a weak area of the brain. So for example, if I have weak processing speed, it would stimulate the brain through mental exercises that target processing speed to get the brain to fire and wire together new neural connections in that part of the brain. It's pretty amazing because we can actually see pre and post therapy measurable changes on brain imaging for those connections in that part of the brain. So this is a corrective measure that improves underlying cause of ADHD, the weak cognitive skills. We do see this as highly effective. 70% of the children that we see that are on ADHD medications come off within 6 months of therapy and are better off than they were on. So it is truly treating those root issues. So that's something that is definitely worth checking into. And everyone always asks, sometimes insurance does cover this. About half of our clients are able to get insurance coverage. So if that's something you're interested in investigating, we can always help you with that. Study skills and executive function coaching can be really helpful for that tip of the pyramid. We do offer this at the Nectar Group as well, but there are other programs that are really high quality that do as well. We recommend that any program that's going to work on study skills or executive function with your child includes these items that you see on your screen, that you have direct coaching and implementation of time management and organization. We work with students and we actually log into Schoology or Canvas, the different online portals that your schools are using, and coordinate what's going on in that with a planner, teach the student a planner management system, etc. for that. Study hacks and habits, how to be a good student, how to optimize your brain performance to improve your school performance, responsibility and self-advocacy, study strategies. We teach 22 different study methods, critical thinking skills, note-taking, and test-taking strategies. Those are all super important. Another therapy that can be effective that we do not do at the Nectar Group, but we did provide some referrals to some really stellar, a couple of really stellar providers in your packets that go along with this presentation. These are people who have high level of expertise in this, is neurofeedback. Now, neurofeedback will not treat those cognitive skills. It treats the brainwave imbalances. And so just at a real basic level, sensors are attached to the head that give you biofeedback, feedback on the brain waves to a screen, and the client is asked to do a certain task that alters the brain waves and allows us to see that change in real time. And then over time, the brain learns how to control the brain's responses to stimuli. So again, it doesn't affect the cognitive skills. So if the problem is like poor working memory, we don't typically see a change there, but what we will see a change in is reduction in anxiety, improved symptoms of depression, improved symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, and better ability to emotionally regulate and thus better pay attention. So this can be a highly effective treatment if the root issues for your child are more emotional in nature. We also have our psychological interventions. These are going to be things such as psychotherapy, that could be talk therapy, play therapy, art therapy. This is where they learn strategies to mitigate inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. It helps increase coping with the emotional impact of the symptoms, and you can really help your child learn how to challenge negative thinking and build self-esteem. So we also, we do not offer psychotherapy at the Nectar Group. We've given you a couple of resources for great people in the community that are excellent with kids with ADHD. There's plenty of others, and we can help you with placing with someone if you need that. And then there's also parent coaching. This is kind of the emotional and intervention support for parents to help you really learn specific discipline techniques that are proven to be effective in reducing problem behaviors, and learn how to communicate better as a family system to help everyone manage by the challenges of having someone with ADHD in your family. We do offer this at the Nectar Group, and then we also, if it's outside of our expertise, can refer you out for that also. Another thing that everyone asks us about are dietary impact and supplements. And you might have tried some supplements and not found they help. It is really important to line up the supplements and nutritional interventions that can really help. We do recommend that you consult with a physician that is trained and board certified in holistic medicine for treating ADHD in teens. We've given you in your packets a few physicians that we work with closely that have tremendous success that meet these requirements. There's others, of course, too. But the things that we find helps everyone because they're great, just good brain health practices are, number one, a diet that's high in healthy fats, such as coconut oil, flaxseed, avocado, fatty fish, such as salmon and olive oil. The brain really responds extremely well to these healthy fats. It allows those neurons to fire and wire together, and it helps with emotional regulation that's typically poor in children with ADHD. We do recommend that you consider supplementing with omega-3s like fish oil. It's very hard to get those in your diet. You, of course, need to check with with your physician if you have other medical conditions or something. We don't want to send you to the store to buy something that's going to cause a problem. But we do work with a doctor named Dr. Scott Shannon, who's a board certified pediatric psychiatrist who just retired this past January from being the president of the American Holistic Medical Association. He's up in Fort Collins, and we provided for you in your packet his dosing guidelines for this by age that he shares with everyone. We also recommend that in addition to increasing healthy fats, you focus on balanced meals and snacks. And this means that every snack or meal contains a healthy fat, a complex carbohydrate, and a protein. This could be an apple with nut butter, for example. It has all three of those. This prevents blood sugar from spiking and crashing, which aggravates impulsivity, inattention, and hyperactivity. All super important things that we want to minimize that blood sugar can have a really significant effect on. You really want to consider now also limiting or eliminating certain foods. Sugar and processed food consumption is a biggie. And also neurotoxin consumption. People have very strong opinions about gluten and gluten sensitivities in our current age, but we do know the science is pretty resound that children with ADHD have a much higher rate of gluten sensitivity, and we see in a reduction in gluten in the diet can have a marked impact on improvement of symptoms. There's a fantastic book if you want to learn more about this called Grain Brain. It's by Dr. Perlmutter. He's a board certified neurologist from Johns Hopkins, and the whole book is about the impact of gluten grains on different learning issues and brain function. It has a lot of information about ADHD specifically in there. So those are some things that you could consider investigating. Something else that's not fancy, it's tried and true, but is exercise. We know that 5 times a week for 30 minutes each time is really important for ADHD. Exercise actually targets the same chemicals that stimulant medication targets, which is why Dr. John Rady's book called Spark that I referenced earlier is a fantastic read about how to utilize exercise as effectively as medications. You really want to make sure that it's structured so that it doesn't get missed and that there's a lot of variety, because people with ADHD get bored easily. So that can be a great way to implement this. Our next area is actually also sleep. You want to make sure you're practicing good sleep hygiene. Something that's interesting is we know that people with ADHD need more sleep than people who don't have ADHD. Their brains are super busy all the time and they need more restorative sleep. And so you want to make sure that you're doing things like creating a cool, quiet bedroom, that your bedroom should be focused on sleeping, not laying in bed doing your homework leading up, which makes it harder to turn the brain off, not doing overstimulating activities in the bedroom. And then of course, doing things like limiting caffeine, screen time, and even vigorous exercise towards the end of the day is super important because it will disrupt sleep patterns. And so lots more that we could dig into on sleep, but we'll keep moving for the sake of time now.
Hey, Andrea, I want to just interrupt real quick. Family asked a question that's such a great question. Can we help guide families figure out what type of therapy is best for their child? We know that this is a lot of information and we're going pretty rapidly through it all. And so I want to let you guys know that absolutely, this is what Andrea's been doing for 20 plus years. And I've never seen someone who knows as much about the Denver community as she does, and so we can absolutely help sit down and just walk you through like your presentation, your children, especially, this person said, if you have more than one kid with an ADHD diagnosis and they don't present the same. So please know that as a parent, one of our biggest goals is to be a resource for you. And so we are more than happy to sit down and talk about individual cases because we know that this is like, okay, now I need to figure out their sleep and their exercise. And, one of my biggest recommendations is we'll just start at step 1 and go from there. But yes, we can help with anybody who just wants to know, like, how can I get help with my individual case?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Absolutely. And just to echo that sentiment, one of the worst things you can probably do is get off of this meeting and try to go home or like sit down and go, we're changing our sleep, we're changing our diet, we're changing, we're going and signing up for all these therapies. It's not manageable. And all of you don't need to do all of these. You need to do the right ones for your child. And that's what we can help you with, is creating an action plan of which things would be worthwhile for you to do. I don't have a single family that does all of these things. Today, we want to get you exposure to the things that have great research behind it. And again, we always will do a complimentary consultation with you for that. That's why Danny and I and all of our team do this work, is we're passionate about helping families connect with the right resources. That might be us and that might be something else, and we can help you create a plan for that. So another thing to look at is community. There are social skills group that can help kids with ADHD that struggle socially as well. Like this works on how to notice subtle nonverbal cues, remain attentive during conversations, inhibit impulsive social behavior, respect boundaries, all of these kinds of things in a social setting. Now, right now, these are a little bit unique. They've moved to largely online, of course. But again, this is not something that we provide at the Nectar Group, but we have great resources we can help you with on that. And then also support groups. This just provides education and emotional support and encouragement for parents of children with ADHD, and some even for the children themselves, especially as they head into teenage years and young adults. So again, we can help you with connecting with some of those support groups if you need that. Our next area that I'm going to touch on briefly, because this could be a full day workshop in and of itself, is medication. So there is not a 100% right or wrong answer on should you use pharmaceutical interventions to help your child. The key that we want to stress, though, is that medication is used for symptom management primarily. Now, there's obviously medications for other disorders that doesn't apply to. We're not talking about those. We're talking specifically about the primary medications that are used to treat ADHD symptomatology. Meaning, if you stop taking the medicine, your symptoms come back because you haven't actually corrected the underlying issues. It's not like an antibiotic that kills a bacteria and now you're well and you stop taking it. And so one of the doctors we refer a lot of our clients to, I was actually talking to him the other day, and I think he's seen over 200 of our clients now. His name is Dr. Pierre Brunjwig. He's at a practice called Helios Integrated Medicine. He's fantastic at helping actually treat the root issues. And my favorite quote of his is, "No one was born with a Ritalin deficiency. The medication isn't actually treating what is causing it." So our approach and our philosophy is that medication should be considered as a last result, and only after a comprehensive evaluation and attempting other biopsychosocial interventions, because it doesn't treat the root issue, it manages symptoms. That's not to say that we're saying that anyone is bad for putting their child on medication or using that medication to help them. The vast majority of parents are looking for how to help their child be successful in the safest and best way for their child. Some of the concerns are posted here in terms of negative impacts. These medications can be addictive and are often abused as people get older. They can have significant short and long-term side effects that are listed here for the different classifications. So again, just something to be aware of and important of. And the thing is it's not that we are anti-medication at all, but we are pro actually treating the root problem so that we remove the need for the medication long haul. And that's our focus. So super important here. Now, our next thing that we are going to cover is going to be some things that are related to schools. And Danny is going to jump in and talk to you some about accommodations for the classroom. We're going to go into this, and because we've been answering your questions as we go, we're going to go up, and we had some time allotted at the end for some Q&A, and we're going to just probably go into that to finish this content for you because we've been taking the questions all along.
So continue to keep asking those questions because we definitely want to make sure we answer them. But, you know, this is an area where I'm super passionate because being a classroom teacher, and especially a middle school teacher, with any of you that have middle school children, we know that that's a crazy time of their life anyway. It's so important that we're able to provide the supports necessary in a classroom to make them feel successful and confident in learning. And I will tell you that, I'm always astounded by all of the educators I know, because they are so dedicated to being the ones that provide this, even with remote learning or hybrid learning. So, what we've done is we've pulled together what are things that you can do with accommodations in the classroom or accommodations at home that, or not accommodations at home, but supports at home that are going to help at home learning or remote learning. So what we'll talk about first are accommodations in the classroom. So some of the most common accommodations that you might see on an IEP for your child with ADHD is extended time for testing in a quiet testing environment. We all know that students with ADHD are more distracted by the environment around them, especially during a test when it might be taking them longer to finish and their peers start to finish around them, and then they feel stressed out and they rush and they don't finish the test because they don't want to be the last one done. So removing that can be helpful for them. Seating in an area of the room that allows for monitoring and limited distractions. And so we call this preferential seating. And I always like to tell parents, this doesn't necessarily mean that the child's going to be dead center in front of the teacher at the front of the classroom. For some students, that's imperative. For other classroom setups or, for other students, that might mean that they might be seated at the back of the room so that they can stand up as their teacher is teaching at the front at the whiteboard, and they can stand up and, maybe move around a little bit without it being distracting to others. In an art classroom, I've seen preferential seating be that they're not next to all of the art supplies so that they're not fidgeting with them or getting distracted. So this could be really helpful. Checks for understanding for those with ADHD is one of the most important things educators can do, because a lot of times they're zoning out or they're distracted when multi-step instructions are introduced. And so they don't know what all of the steps were. And so frequent checks for understanding are going to help catch the things they missed. Breaking tasks and long-term projects into smaller chunks. This can be at home or in the classroom. If you have a huge research essay, that's pretty overwhelming for someone who really can't have a long-term attended focus. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're breaking that into smaller chunks so that they can accomplish those one at a time and then have the whole project done as a whole. And then a copy of teacher notes for lectures for students to annotate in class. Now, this is one where people fall a little bit divided on. I'm always an advocate for the reason why we say to provide teacher notes before a lecture is oftentimes students with ADHD just can't keep up with the rate of information. And so we want to make sure that they have that beginning to the notes, and they can add, anecdotes that their teachers add in, or they can add examples that are written on the board or visuals that are written on the board, and keep up with the information and process it all at the same time. I don't think it should ever be where they get a copy of the notes and then they're passive participants during the note taking. They should always be adding and enhancing or adding questions that they have or any connections that pop up in their head. So it's still a really active way to be able to get the information. Now, some strategies for at-home learning. So this is where we know a lot of parents are struggling right now with like the remote learning. So one of the great things you can do is set a focus timer for sustained attention to schoolwork. So there's little timers where you can set it for, say, 30 minutes of sustained focus and attention, and then you're going to give them a pre-established break time. So you want to clearly communicate the timeline so that children know what to expect, because you'll be surprised if they know, okay, I have to work really hard for 30 minutes and then I get 10 minutes to go outside and run. They tend to really regulate themselves much better. And then you want to make sure that when they are taking those breaks, that they're technology-free breaks. The more that you can get them technology-free when they're not doing remote learning, the better, just because that gives the brain a chance to step away from a screen, go outside, get fresh air, sunshine while we still can. Of course, you know, I'm not telling you to send them out when it's a blizzard in January. Or even, you know, I've seen some of my friends who have younger kids who set up some really easy obstacle courses in their living room. And whenever they're having a break from a Zoom meeting, they can go ahead and go run the obstacle course. They like set up a competition board on their fridge where like can you beat your previous time? So lots of ways we can get them moving in between. And then utilize parental technology controls, block access to apps and social media. They're already distracted enough. You don't want them to be on TikTok looking at all of these, you know, dances and things like that. You want to make sure that you're helping them remove that so that they can concentrate and focus. Now, of course, set up designated times for them to do that so that they're not feeling stressed out that they're missing out on what their friends are saying and doing. Take advantage of help and support from teachers. I will tell you, all of my friends who are teachers, they told me that the number one thing they wish families would know is that they are there for help and assistance, and they want kids to still ask one-on-one questions. They still want them to ask for help when they need it. And so a lot of times with remote learning, that seems like kids are less likely to ask for help. My one teacher is an 8th grade math teacher, and there were weeks, you know, in the spring where she would have 1 to 2 of her 180 students actually ask her for one-to-one help, even though there was plenty of time for it. So really take advantage of the supports all of the schools have for you. Set and stick to a routine, just like when school's in. Bedtimes, wake up times, and meal times. This is one that I know parents that I've talked to and that our families have expressed they're struggling with the most. Even if your child is on a hybrid schedule where they're home 2 days a week and then they're at school 2 days a week, they need to be getting up at the same time every day, because that regulation is actually really important for brain health and for optimal learning. Also, going to bed at night, you know, just as if they had to go to school the next day is really important, because if you have those varying bedtimes and wake up times, it really does interfere with regulation. So meal times as well. We all know all of the memes that were online in the spring where parents were saying they're eating me out of house and home because they're home all day and they're eating all the snacks and food. A great thing to remember is we want to still regulate, of course, access to snacks and meals. I've seen some really creative ideas where like parents have like a little bin of like, here's your snacks for the day, just like if they were going to school and you sent them a lunch box. Again, regulating that blood sugar so they're not crashing or they're not getting amped up on sugar. And then control sugar and processed food intake, ensure access to blood sugar, balancing snacks and meals. A lot of kiddos are getting ready for Halloween, and we know that that means those sugary snacks they like for school. Our next one, oh yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
I just wanted to address a couple questions that have come in. We've had at least 4 or 5 people ask a question that's not directly to this slide, but from what we've already covered. And that is, what age can you actually treat ADHD? Is there kind of a limit, or is it too young? Like, for example, the cognitive training therapy that we talked about that's very effective at treating. And the great news is it's never too late to treat that. We start with children as young as 4, and our oldest client right now is 67. So it's never too early or too late, really. However, I will tell you, because what the majority of the questions that have just recently come in are, what about for kids that are 16, 17, 15, you know, our high school students or students getting ready to go to college? And actually 80 to 85% of our clients are between the ages of 12 and 21 that get this type of therapy. It's just because a lot of times it takes until that point to get an accurate diagnosis and to get to the right type of therapy. So this, again, don't worry about that you've missed a window with your teenager. You can still have significant impact. And these things that Danny is covering are great for all ages as well. So I just wanted to clarify that, since several people were asking about it. So
That's great. I mean, I actually have a family member who is doing it, and she's 28, but she's actually applying for a really rigorous master's program at West Point, and she was having trouble studying for the GRE, and so it really came down to her ADHD, her attention and focus, her short-term memory, and so she actually did cognitive training, and she told me she wishes that it maybe was something she had done a little bit before 28, because it would have just made college easier for her. But she's so excited now because it's just really helped her be able to attend and focus. And, you know, anyone who's taking the GRE, you have to study for 5 hours a day. So you definitely need that. Okay, perfect. Well, some great ways to facilitate study skills. First and foremost, develop a regular routine with your child, no matter their age. You want to get them in a routine where it's the easiest for them to be attentive. I'll tell you, 9 o'clock at night is not usually that time. So if you can set that time up for earlier on in the day, I know a lot of kids have sports or they want to take a nap after school, but really getting them into a good time is going to help with that. Allow for studying in a quiet place. I know a house can be crazy, especially if you have multiple kids and they're not all going to be studying at the same time, especially if you have younger kids and older kids mixed together. So really making sure there's a quiet place for studying. Take frequent breaks. This is actually one that parents are like, that seems counterproductive. They're never going to go back to studying if they take a break. But it's the same thing as that focus timer, where if you're setting a timer for 30 minutes, you're doing hard, sustained, focused attention. You do need to give the brain a break to go eat a snack, get some sunshine, come back to it fresh. And then stay alert by using movement while studying. We love brain science and studying. That's what we do. And so you want to make sure that they're active when they're studying. You want them to be writing in the margins and annotating. They should be making a mind map as they're studying their information, reading out loud, reciting information out loud. And then use active reading techniques. One thing I always taught my 8th graders, because it's, you know, never too early, is I always gave them sticky notes. And I had them, if they was like a school book or a library book they had to return, I had them do annotation on sticky notes. We called it sticky note reading in the book, where they could write questions, main plot points, character development. And so it's a great way for them to be active readers. They should review notes before and after class and color code their notes. We actually use a color coding system where you actually color it like green for I've got this 100%, yellow for I need to review this content, and then pink for I need to actually go in and be retaught this by my teacher. And that really helps set them up for like finals so that they can get a good grasp of what they need to study or what they need to relearn. Help them with organization. We all know that a lot of students with ADHD struggle with like their backpacks, their desks, their physical space, also their planners and lists. We, again, love to color code planners so that it's visual and they can see what they've got on their docket and what they need to accomplish. And then, of course, ask for help. There's amazing teachers, counselors, and tutors from your school district that can help your child no matter what, even if they're at home or if they're at school. We did have a great question about listening to music while studying. And actually, all of the brain research shows that if a child listens to music while studying, it needs to be only instrumental music. Music with words is actually dividing the brain's attention, because whether or not your kid tells you, I swear I'm not distracted by it, your brain is using some of its power, its processing, to be able to process the words in the song. And so if it's just listening to instrumental music, that's fantastic. But if they're listening to their favorite, you know, pop or rap, that's actually going to be especially distracting to the ADHD brain. So I When I was a teacher, I had to contend with that because, of course, middle schoolers want to listen to music because it helps them focus. But I had to really dig into some of those research articles with my class and be like, here's why you want to make sure that you're not getting distracted by those lyrics. We're also going to go over really quickly some strategies for studying, but I want to tell you before we start that these are all in that packet that got sent out. And if you didn't get it, please email us. We'll have our contact information at the end and I can send it to you again. Because even if I only highlight some of these are fantastic for you to even pass on to your middle or high schooler, because it's going to show you what are some strategies they can use when the skill is strong versus weak. And it's going to be specific to the 3 cognitive skills that are tied to ADHD: processing speed, short-term memory, and attention and focus. So our first one, processing speed. When processing speed is weak, of course, we know that it takes the student longer to get work done, to attend and focus. So we actually want to use a timer for homework. We don't want a student to be working on homework for 3+ hours when it's not their, it's not supposed to take them that long. And what you're going to have then is frustration. You're going to have fatigue. So we want to set a timer, and we want to have that communication with teachers of, hey, this is taking them 3 hours. And the teacher's probably going to tell you, it should only take 30 minutes. Let's set up some times. Tackle one item at a time. Multitasking can actually slow you down. I hear students all the time who are like, well, I do 10 minutes of my math and then 10 minutes of my reading. And you're like, no. Let's attend and focus. Let's tackle one item, get it crossed off our list first. We want to eliminate all distractions while working. We already talked about this: phone, text, music with words, and social media. We want to allow for extra time to complete assignments. We're starting it early instead of the day before it's due. And then check your notes against other students' notes to make sure you didn't miss any key points. This is a really good part of being able to double check yourself and advocate for yourself as a middle or high schooler. Then for attention and focus, this is going to be the ability to switch between tasks, ignore distractions. When you're in the classroom, you want to sit close to the teacher, away from distractions like windows, doors, or friends. We know that they need friend time right now, but with that struggle to attend and focus, we want to just tell them that's the classroom isn't the time. We want to remove distractions. We want to use a planner and check in with our teachers to make sure we've got everything written down. And we want to color code our materials so that we can stay focused on what we have to accomplish that day. And then short-term memory. When you have low short-term memory, it's the ability to take notes off of the board. Think about, I look up at the board and I have low short-term memory. By the time I've written the first couple words of what I saw on the board, I've forgotten the second half. So I have to look back up, and it just takes a lot longer. And that's where those teacher notes can really help. And then use graphic organizers, mind maps to really repeat the information for your brain, and use review information in short bursts throughout the day and throughout the semester. I see kids who cram for finals the week before. You want to actually be having them set up some times for the 2 months before finals so that they're exposing themselves to those different areas of content throughout those 2 months and not just at the very end. And I know I went through all of that really quickly, and I think that someone said that possibly that is missing from our handout. If it is, we will absolutely send it to you if you let us know. But we want kids to be able to take this and really, what I've done with a lot of our students is actually have them sit down. And it's just like what Andrea said to some of you earlier. Don't tackle all of these strategies at once. Have your child choose one of these strategies to implement first. See how it goes, reflect. And then choose another one that you can implement. But asking students to completely change all of their study strategies right off the bat is going to be overwhelming. And that's the last thing we want to do for a student who oftentimes is already overwhelmed by what school can be. So of course, make a plan to just help support them and implement things one at a time. Also, we want it to be sustainable throughout school and not just, oh, I did all of this for a couple weeks and then it crashed and burned and I never got it back up again. We all know what that's like from trying to eat healthier, implement healthy habits ourselves. So, and then, we really are a resource. We're here to help. We want to be able to give you guys lots of, advice if you want it, or answer your questions. And so there are many ways that we can help, from psychoeducational assessments to help diagnose ADHD, to cognitive assessments that are going to still give us all of the underlying cognitive skills that might be causing those learning challenges. We have cognitive skills training to help strengthen those cognitive skills, the executive function and study skills coaching, and then also any kinds of consultations and screeners we can provide for you complimentary, just so that you can help with a path of how to help your child. As an educator, the number one thing that made me want to be with the Nectar group was I wanted to start helping the students that I felt like I couldn't help in the classroom, because I just had so many students and they needed one-to-one help, or they needed my help in a different way. And so I just want to be able to help families in that same way. And I know Andrea does as well. So we're here to give you any of the help that you need. And then in your packet, you also have a list of all the resources we've mentioned today, books, and people throughout the community that can help you with the different types of therapy. So just refer to that handout for all of those lists of resources. Thank you guys so much for your time today and for listening to all of that information. We know it was a lot.
Danny, do you want to pop up that information with our contact for those that were looking for it? Perfect.
Thank you, gals. Wow. I've got, I don't know how many pages of notes with just great resources that you have offered, just not only from your own practice, but from other members in the community. And so I especially appreciate that, because I know parents who are dealing with this in their families really are looking for concrete people to call and talk to, and things, little changes that ooh, this really will make a difference for myself or my family or my kiddo or the people that you're in contact with. So thank you so much for so much preparation into this and for offering it to us. Just to let all of you who are listening know that we will, if you go back to the PINCCSD.org website, sign up for our emails, you will be on our email list. We will forward the specific information that has been requested, primarily the strategies for studying, as well as the screening and ways to contact both Danny and Andrea. We will forward that to you this week, with also more information about the next PIN presentation, which is also going to be a follow-up to this, much more specifically on executive function, what you were learning about today. So that is something that anybody of any age can appreciate and learn from and benefit from. So for sure, you will want to tune in to that. That will be October 20th after fall break if you're in CCSD schools, and it will be in the evening. So that will start at 6:30. The presenters will start at 6:45. I think we've got everything covered. Remember that this will be posted probably within about 24 hours on the PIN CCSD website. So if you want to look back and you couldn't write fast enough, like I couldn't, it's all on video. So you can pause it and read what you need to read. You can make little posters and reminders for you and your family. So the information is there. It will be fully accessible to you on the PIN website as early as sometime tomorrow. And then you will be getting a PIN email with more information. So again, many kudos to Andrea and Danny. Thank you so much for helping educate and inspire and inform our PIN community. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on October 20th.
Have a great fall break.
Yeah.
Thank
For
you.
having us.
All right. All the best to everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.